Okay.
I've not heard from you today at all.
Afternoon. Afternoon class.
Okay, good afternoon.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Okay. All right. I'm trying to do this. What is happening? Just very briefly, we discussed in the concept of majority of what we need to know. So we talked about variances and standard costing. We said the variance is a deviation from expected, and that variances can be broadly divided into cost and sales variances, and that variances for costs are the exact opposite of variances for sales. So if our deviation is favorable, it will mean that our actual cost is less than our expected cost. And if our expected cost is less than actual cost, then it means that we spent more than we expected to spend, which is a bad thing, and so we call that adverse. And we looked at the reasons why variances might occur. First of all, breaking our variances into our cost variances into material, labor, overheads, so both fixed and variable overheads. And we looked at for material variances, we have usage and price, and we said that usage variances are as a result of internal factors to the organization, while price variances are as a result of external factors. And we looked at different things that could cause variances for materials, particularly in this for material usage and price. I also emphasized, and this is something that I'll emphasize at every juncture, is that you should remember that when they ask you for reasons or that you should discuss factors that might lead to a variance, then it will be very scenario specific. So what I tried to do was to make sure that it's not possible really to have an exhaustive list of the causes of variances. However, the scenario will give you information, and if you get the understanding, then you'll be able to discuss. And why I wanted us to spend a lot of time or a significant portion of time at this beginning is that this will form the basis for the rest of what we will do. And it will be important for you to at least be able to understand the causes of variances generally, so that to this scenario, you'll be able to apply the information in the scenario to find out what has caused a variance. And we also looked at labor variances, and we said labor variances can be broken down into efficiency and rate. And efficiency variance has to do with the time taken by staff, while the rate variance has to do with the pay, the actual pay to staff compared to the expected or the planned, the budgeted pay for those staff. We looked at variable production overheads and fixed production overheads. It is unlikely that in the exam you will see anything to do with overheads. It's unlikely. Unlikely is not a word that I use lightly, because you might see, but most of the time the focus will be on the other aspects of variance that we want to look at now. We broke fixed and variable production overheads into expenditure and efficiency. And then we said for our fixed overhead variance, it can be broken down into volume and expenditure. However, the volume and capacity. And I said that capacity variance is the least rational one amongst all the variances we are discussing, because the capacity variance basically measures the capacity, the amount of time that is used. So if the actual amount of time is higher than the expected amount of time, even though this is a cost variance, it is favorable to have a higher capacity. So that is not in the, it doesn't follow the same logic that we have used for, like efficiency now. If you use more is bad for costs, but more capacity is good. More capacity is seen as favorable. Do you get the point?
Yeah.
Okay. variances, we can look at, because sales is a combination of the volume sold and the price at which each individual one was sold. So we looked at our sales price variance and our sales volume variance. And we said for our computations, the first thing we want to think about are these basic symbols that will form the basis for every other thing we're going to do. So SQ is standard quantity, AP, actual price, and all of these have to do with material variances. Then for the other variances, so overhead and labor variances, instead of using quantity, we'll use hours, because it is hours that is a measure of the quantity of time taken. And then instead of overhead, so we have standard hours, standard rate, actual hour, and actual rate. And then went on to say that standard hour or standard quantity, which is given per unit, is short for standard quantity of actual production or standard hours of actual production. And I said, as we go through, you will be able to understand by the actual production what you have in your flexed budget. However, the standard multiplied by the budget will give you what you have in your fixed budget. So this is another point that can be examined one way or another, either in computation or discursive. And then as we do our questions, because my intention will be to get a number of questions, quite a number of questions done over this, so that we'll get clarity. Truth about variances, as you practice, you get stronger and stronger until your learning curve, until you get to steady state. Like me, I'm on steady state, I'm pretty sure about it. One thing I can make noise about is variance in this life. One thing I know, and it's just practice. So once you practice and practice and practice, it's not too much skill. Once you get to a particular point, you know it, and no matter what the question is, I'm always excited about variance, like I always emphasize, because it's one of the few things where it's quite easy to get 100 over 100 in variance, especially the computation part. Now, actual quantity, actual price, actual hour, actual rate, that's the base of our pro forma, which we are going to see now, is almost always given in total terms. So some of those things are things that from experience I have seen, and those things I like to mention them, so that as you start getting understanding, when you, after a week or so, after maybe 4 classes of doing this variance computation, so today, Tuesday evening, Saturday and Sunday, by the end of Sunday, if you come back and look at these things that we've written here that are just looking very theoretical, you will now start being able to join things together. And then as we go into the Tuesday and Saturday, more likely than not, of the next week, by that time we'll just be tying our understanding, and then we'll be good for exams. So we said our pro formas will look somewhat like this. We came to our whiteboard and we gave an example of how our pro forma will look. So for material now, we'll have standard quantity, standard price on top, actual quantity, standard. So it's always standard, standard, actual, standard, actual, actual. So that's the first thing I want you to have in your mind. And remember, we said actual, actual is usually given in total terms. So we'll use an example now, and I will implore you to go back and work on that example between today and tomorrow, so that by Tuesday, that example is with you. So that when we add something, because what we are going to be doing, adding things on top of our knowledge. And as we add things, if your knowledge previously is solid, then the new addition will be liquid, for lack of a better word. Just felt like that to me. So standard, standard, actual, standard, actual, actual. Please be conscious about it. It's standard first, standard on top, actual, standard in the middle, actual, actual on top. Let me give you, how do they say that thing? Shock horror. I want to show you something, take you into the future. In the future, we might be looking at this pro forma for material, for example, and readjusting it. Readjusting doesn't mean we're not changing anything here. We might just add something. So in some cases now, we might add a line under line 2. like what we saw for our fixed production variance. That was the first time we made any adjustment. So if we go back, oh no, we have not yet gotten there. So we'll see that now. So standard, actual, actual. So the top minus bottom, as always, in every single case, our performance don't change. Why I use, and I've had experience of using different ways of computing variances. This is by far the most effective way of computing variances. Reason more than any other thing is that it doesn't change. Our performer remains constant. All we do is make adjustment to it. If you fail a variance question using this performer, it's not the performer's fault, it's your fault, no matter what the variance question is. And we're going to see this going forward. However, as we become comfortable with this kind of standard performer, we'll start making adjustments to it, significant adjustments in some cases. However, the original performer will not change. So to answer a question, we would make our performer flexible. So this performer is not rigid. Depending on what you're asked to do, and once you see it the first time, you've seen it. Going forward, it should be a lot easier. Okay, so we look at direct material. So for direct material variance, like we said, standard, so standard quantity, standard price, actual quantity, standard price, actual quantity, actual price. Difference between top and bottom is usage in this case. So if top is greater than bottom, it means that we have a favorable variance. So we're just doing top minus bottom. If it is positive, then it's favorable. If it is negative, then it is adverse. Then for price now, we're doing number 2 minus number 3. So still top minus bottom for price. So if it is positive, favorable, adverse. If it is negative, then adverse. So we said for quantity, we are going to use hours. For any other thing, for labor or overheads. So for quantity, we're using hours. Instead of price, we're using rate. So we'll see that the next performer will look exactly like the first one we did, except incorporating those 2 changes I mentioned. So we'll see it's standard, actual. And like we said, actual will be given to you in total terms. So top minus bottom efficiency. If top is greater than bottom, favorable. If not, adverse. And same thing, second minus third. If second is greater than third, favorable. If not, adverse. We go to our efficiency, and we said the only adjustment from labor to our variable production overhead is something that is paid to human beings. Expenditure, on the other hand, is for inanimates, so anything that is not living. So we have our rate variance being second minus third, while our efficiency variance is first minus second. If not, it looks exactly the same as the labor variance. And then we come to our fixed production overhead. And the fixed production overhead is the first time that we adjust our original. So in the fixed overhead, you say what?
You still have rate in there for the variable overhead.
Yes, I said it's rate. Hours and rates are for anything that is not material. So for material, we would have had quantity and price. Oh, okay, I wrote rate here. Okay, I didn't adjust it. Okay, thank you. I get what you're saying. So it's expenditure. Thank you. That's expenditure for overhead. Thank you. So that's that. So for the fixed overhead variance is the first time that we're going to make a distinction, or we're going to see how we can adjust our performer to meet whatever requirements we have. So we continue our standard, actual standard, and we put a further line, we make a slight adjustment to our performer by putting our budgeted standard. So we have budgeted standard on the third, and every time we're adjusting our performer, we usually adjust it from below the second one. So that's usually our adjustment. So here we have budgeted standard. So we start standard as usual, actual standard, and then we incorporate budgeted standard in the middle. So if you look at our variable overhead variance, what we've just done is to put something in the middle there, put something under the second one, and it still remains the same as the original performer. And we said our volume variance is 1 minus 3, because our efficiency variance is 1 minus 2, and our capacity variance is 2 minus 3. And so then 3 minus 4 now, because of the adjustment, is expenditure. So we'll practice this going forward. And then we go to the final thing that we want to discuss on these pro formas. So let's look at our sales pro formas. So our sales variances now. So for our sales variances, we start with our selling price or sales price variance. So our selling price variance, what we do, so we introduce something else, something I had not said before. So I can either put it up or I can bring it here so that it is closed. So we'll have a number of things. Our sales price variance will look like this. So unlike cost where you have 3, usually, and where you have 3 components of the pro forma, for sales, generally you have only 2. And we'll see that. So we'll have our actual sales price or our actual selling price minus our standard selling price, both of them multiplied. So that now multiplied by the actual sales quantity. That's our sales price variance. Now, please, if you look at this thing now, what can you see? Is there any comment on this?
Total profit.
You said what?
That should be actual selling price, standard selling price.
Minus the standard selling price. So actual sales price that's ASP. Also, Assistant Superintendent of Police. So ASP, SSP is Senior Superintendent. So standard sales or selling price, whether you use sales or selling is fine. Then the other things we would mention are our ASQ, which is your actual sales quantity. And then we'll see going down now our BSQ. Our BSQ is our budgeted sales quantity. And finally, we'll have a standard margin. So our standard margin, and our standard margin will be either profit margin. So we'll have profits. Profit will be where we have absorption costing. So all these things should start. We're not saying anything strange. So absorption costing. And then our, okay, so let me take that down. So it'll be either profit for absorption costing or contribution if we're looking at marginal costing. Okay, so that's that. So if you look at what we've just done upstairs, you will see that we can make this look like the other pro formas, and we can do ASP. Remember that that's ASP multiplied by ASQ, and then now this pro forma now starts looking like the other one. then we would have SSP. So we're opening the bracket. Multi bracket by the one outside. So ASQ. So that gives us our selling price variance. That's our sales price variance. You get what I'm saying? Is this fine for everybody?
Hi, please, sorry. The up one, I'm sorry, I'm having problem with my network.
I noticed that your network is not good. Yeah, you said what? Yeah, I noticed that your network is not good.
Yes. The up one, those other ones written is for what?
Which ones?
The other page up here now.
All we're defining is all these things we'll be talking about. So we'll say ASP, SSP. So what they mean, actual sales quantity, actual sales price or actual selling price, standard selling price, actual sales quantity, budgeted sales quantity.
Okay.
We're just defining them. Then we now start our pro forma. So there are two in this case. In our basic pro forma. So we have our selling price variance, and then we go down, and then we can also have our what's the other one? Our volume variance, right?
Yes.
So our sales volume variance. So our sales volume variance will look like this. So we have actual sales quantity. Please just memorize this because sales variances, just remember that it will always start with the actual. So for sales price, it will start with the actual sales price. For sales volume, it will start with the actual sales volume or actual sales quantity. So actual sales quantity minus budgeted sales quantity into the standard margin. So the standard margin will be either standard profit or standard contribution, depending on whether it is an absorption costing environment or a marginal costing environment. So we can expand this to look like the other performers. So it's ASQ multiplied by what?
SM.
So by the standard margin, and then we have BSQ multiplied by the standard margin again. So since standard margin is constant, we can bring it out and make it shorter. Depending on how the question is presented to me, I would use any of them. And so that's my sales volume variance. Okay, so that's that. So what we'll do now is to break our discussion and then do the question. So once it logs us out, we'll just come back and look at the different things that we'll look at very quickly, read the question, and then in the final analysis, we'll do the question, or we would have started the question and then complete the question by the time we're done. Is there any question whatsoever? Any question?
No.
So we're good to go. Okay. So, so like I said, we can either have it like this, in this structure, or we can have it like this for the sales variances. So for each of them, would constitute. So this, what's that now? 6. I think there are 6. These 6 variances are our basic variances. So just to note, and then we're coming back, and immediately we come back, we go to that white screen and discuss basic versus advanced. So 6 of them, our our direct material, our labor, our variable production overhead, our fixed production overhead, our sales price, and our sales volume variance. All those 6 are our basic variances. So with that, let's look at how this comes. Let's just give ourselves the whole picture of what we are discussing. Okay, now I'll use the whiteboard just to give us small description of what we are doing. So where the basic end, so look at variances. As a subject, as a study. Now under variances, so look at basic. So our basic variances, direct material cost usage, then direct material cost price. So then our direct labor efficiency, direct labor rates, so maybe instead of doing that, I'll just do material variances. I didn't hear you.
Total variance.
The total variance is the combination of two of them. So as we go forward, you will see that. So labor, then variable overheads. So under that we have our, what's that? So variable efficiency and variable production overhead expenditure. And then finally our fixed overhead. And for our fixed overhead, we have our so fixed production overhead efficiency, fixed production overhead capacity, and we said the two of them together are the volume variance, right? So fixed production overhead volume. Sorry. So expenditure, right? And so the only thing I want to mention to that, the only thing I want to mention is that these two together, the two of them together are our volume variance. Okay, so that's two. So the two of them, any combination of the variances that affect one particular input, whether material, labor, or this will be the total. So the combination of what we will learn to do as the top of our pro forma minus the down of our pro forma. So ignore anything in the middle. Top minus bottom is that. So our basic variances, unfortunately, I should have done basic variances, and it's impossible to work this pro forma back. Sorry, it's impossible to work this text backwards. But, oh man, it will not work. So the only thing is, maybe I'll just shift it a little and see whether that will still fall into line. So costs, I don't know where this thing will now go and say. I knew it will not stay well. Ow. And you can't bring it back. Okay, redo. Does it undo? Okay, so our basic now. So our basic is costs. So we're looking at costs versus sales. So for the sales now, like we said before, for our sales now, so we have selling price and sales quantity, sales volume. So that's that. And then we now go to our advanced variances. So under our advanced variances.
Sorry, this one that I just wrote now. Sorry, it comes under what? This selling price variance, because
They're under sales variances. Both of them are sales. That's why I said basic is. I should have left a space when I was writing that the sales variances. Okay, the only other thing is to carry these sales downstairs and just put it under there.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah, so all of them are basic. So that's why the basic extended to both that and the other one. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so our advanced variances now. So for our advanced variances, and we're going to look at a number of things. So for cost, we'll have material, mix, and yield. That's where it starts getting interesting. Of course, generally. So, okay, I think that would be a better way to do it. So we can actually break it down like this. So we have cost. And then we have sales. So under cost, So we have for material, then we have, generally, we would have, okay, so let me leave that. Let me leave that where it is. Then also put operational and planning. So under cost, we still have operational and planning. And under our operational and planning variances, under our cost variances, so we'll have for labor, for material, and then for labor and overheads too.
Oh, God.
What's it, your network?
Yeah, I don't know. It's not just funny.
There was one day that you were waiting for me. I think it was, which day was that? I was so frustrated. So it was the, and I'm just confessing, it was the SIM card I was looking for while you guys were solving. I think it was in FM. I was so mad. This network can give someone hypertension sometimes. Don't be angry. Or is it the village people?
It's your village people, oh.
I don't know. You cannot even keep by yourself. Okay, so we have material here. Is Mr. Richard here? It's not. Okay, so then we have labor. Some of these things in review, you will see how they now make sense. If you're not, well, I've just drawn the picture of what we're going to do. And then we have sales. So for sales, finally, let me bring the sales down. So for sales, we'll now have mix and quantity. And then finally, okay, really finally, we'll have planning and operational. Or did you say operational and planning? It's really planning and operational. Okay, then we'll also have market size and market share as just something that is not really, it's under sales. So we'll just put it at the end. It's not really joined to any of them. So we'll have market size. It's good, it's better, let it even be under operational and planning. So market size and market share. So this is all. This is our story. This is the work that is set in front of us for this aspect of the syllabus. Very.
Brian,
Yes, please.
I have operational and planning in both of them.
Yes, you have
Just
operational and planning.
Under cost and sales.
You have operational and planning in both of them.
Yeah. Then this mix and quantity, I understand everything under cost, like it makes sense thinking about it, but this mix and quantity, you're not mixing now. I
For
thought mix
sales, for
do with
sales, for sales, when you're selling more than one product, just like you thought about, if you say you understand what happened with mix and quantity for cost, right?
yeah.
Mix and yield. So the mix and the yield for cost, which I would explain at the beginning of everyone while we're doing it. The same thing with sales. If you're the idea why you have a mix and a yield for cost is that you have more than one input material.
Yeah.
So when you're putting in more than one thing, so for example, you're making a chair and you need foam and
Wood,
wood,
foam, gum, nail,
leather, and leather. Now there are three things that are making that chair, right? So that's why, because you have more than one input material, you can have the mix and the yield, depending on whether you're using more of the expensive one or more of the cheaper one. That's the basic concept behind mix and yield. Now, for sales now, if you're selling more than one product, that's the same concept. So if you're selling more than one product, if you're selling higher of the more expensive one, it can affect your profitability. So that's basically that's the concept behind it. It's quite straightforward stuff that if you can reason with the first one, then you can reason with the second one.
Yeah,
and like I said, I'm not just going to
I was
throw it at
looking
you.
at one product. I was looking at one.
No, it's multi-products. It's like how you have multi-product environment for CVP. This is multi-product for all the things we are talking about for advanced variances are in either multi-input for the cost or multi-sales for the sales.
Oh, so that's what makes it advanced.
Multi-product. That's why it's advanced, because it's more than one.
Okay.
When we're looking at more than, so you will see that generally with basic variances, the first thing will be XYZ sells one product. That's how it usually starts. Or has one input material. It can have more than one. If it has more than one input material, it can still be basic, but it will still be the basic of the basic. We're looking at them independently. However, if we are dealing with advanced variances, then we're looking at them collectively, not individually.
Thank you.
Yeah. So market size, this thing did not agree to write well. And so I've shortened it to market. So my market is now short. Okay, so that's fine. So we have all of this. So this is our picture. This is what we are going to work on. So we start with the first one. We're going to basically finish all of this now. So the whole basic variance. One, information. Please, I didn't say it anywhere. Please note. I don't know. Let me put it here so that it will still be there. Maybe we'll put it in the notes too. So,
Brian, please don't take off this screen. I want to just copy this stuff quickly.
I want to paste it on your note. So basic variances are not examinable for paper PM. What should I say? Please, I don't know that this is a good thing to say because it is assumed knowledge. Assumed knowledge is examinable. Anything that they expect that you know from outside, they can throw it inside. It will not be a core part of anything you're doing. So it will never come as serious marks. But you get the point of this not examinable. Anything that I'm teaching you is potentially examinable. It might not be, it will not form a major part because it is not in the syllabus, but it is that knowledge you need it to work going forward. So please remember that. I don't like the way this thing pastes. Let me do this. Let me do this first. I'm coming. Okay, better still. Let me hide it. Okay, so that I can get what I want, then I'll come back to that. So I can now copy. Okay, so that's that. Are we back to our, are you seeing our note now? Are we on our note?
It has been on our notes.
No, we have been on the whiteboard since.
No, I'm still seeing variance.
Our Word document.
No, it's
This is on
variance.
Word now. Can you see these 6 variances? The 6 variances above are the basic variances.
No.
Can you?
No.
No, okay. So
Yeah.
please, once you are on Word, please tell me. Once you're back to your notes.
Yeah. We're back.
You're back to your notes. Okay. Okay, so I just placed that in there. So we have that information.
Oh, you are intentionally pasting it in the group.
I always, every time we write whiteboard, there's no other way for it to work.
Okay.
So you see, it's not a picture that is all those things you see on your whiteboard. It's actually your note. Okay, so we're good. Shall we?
Yeah.
Okay. So we now go to our question. Let's go to that question we were looking at. Or any question so far? Any question? Would you?
Yes.
Next week has reached though.
Okay.
Correct. So next week that seemed like if it will never come. That's finally come. I'm excited about next week. Today is the beginning of the week. Oh. Okay, so let's read our question. Nice. So beginning of our question, everybody home?
Yeah.
So we're going to work on these 4 proformas. Sorry, 6 proformas. I take 6 of them. So we're going to work on them now. Please, who's reading? Is your network back up? Okay. Ella here. Yes, now. Even you are muting your phone and hiding your face. The world is coming to an end, though. Wonderful. Ella, you see, the problem with all these things.
Transit. She said she's on transit.
Okay, sorry. So who will help us now? Hi.
Siri, where are you? Siri?
Oh, yeah. Uju, if you're not using your phone, please read for us. Said I wish was here now. Said I wanted to read. At least let's gradually incorporate you back into the class. Small, at least let's hear the voice first before we don't see the face. Yeah. Time is going.
Let me read for us, Brian.
Okay, sir. All right. Thank you.
Sydney manufactures one product, and the entire product is sold as soon as it is produced. There are no opening or closing inventories, and work in progress is negligible. The company operates a standard costing system. An analysis of variances is made every month. The standard cost card for the product, a boomerang, is as follows.
Okay, before you go on,
okay,
the standard way, and we'll see this, and it actually maybe make us smile after a while. The standard way that variance questions are set are, variance questions are usually set as the top of the question, the beginning of the question, the first financial information will usually be the standard. Somewhere in the middle, they will give you the budget. And at the end, they will give you the actual. So it's usually set as standard information. So if you're looking for standard, it's usually on top. The first figures, the first figures will be standard. In the middle, somewhere just one line or so will be the budget. And then under, at the base of the question, before the requirements basically will be actual. So once you're experienced, what you will just be doing is, if I'm looking for a standard something, I'll just go to the top of where the information is, the financial information. If I'm looking for budget, it's in the middle. If I'm looking for actual, it's at the end. And that's how it will generally be. Okay, so you can read through. So they've given us a standard cost card, right?
Yeah, standard cost card, boomerang. Direct materials, 0.5 kilos at $4 per kilo, making $2.
Okay, so let me say this before we move forward. Sorry for interrupting. So for the direct material, they've given us half a kilo, so that's 0.5 kilos, $4 per kilo, and then our $2, right?
Yeah.
Now, in terms of material, because that's material, our 0.5 kilos is our standard quantity quantity per unit. So we use half a kilo for 1 unit, right?
Yeah.
Our $4 is our dollar per kilo. So it is our standard price. The price that we are talking about when we say standard price, if you look back at the pro forma, our standard price is the price per kilogram, not price per unit. Now, our price per unit is 0.5 times 4, which is $2. That is, price per unit is our standard quantity, standard price for
please
one.
Say that again. It was quite fast. Sorry.
Yes, please, I want you to understand, because that's fundamental. In this question now, 0.5 kilos is our kilograms per unit. That's our standard quantity. Is that fine?
Yes, and standard price I understand, but the last thing you were just saying.
So let me for those people so the standard quantity is 0.5 kilograms per unit. So we use half a kilo for 1 unit. Our standard price is $4 per kilogram. Our standard price is per kilogram, per input, per the input. However, your standard quantity times your standard price will give you your standard price per unit. This is very, very, very important. And you will see when the questions become more intricate that we'll need all this information. So our standard quantity, 0.5. Our standard price, that's our SP normally, which is our standard price per the input material, because we're looking at direct material. So per the input material, our standard price is $4 per kilogram. However, 0.5 times 4 will give us 2. That 2 is our standard quantity, standard price per unit. So it's our standard quantity, standard price. So it's 0.5 times 4 that will give you that 2. That's your standard price per unit. Your standard price per unit is standard quantity, standard price. If we go to wages, the same thing. 2 hours is our 2 hours, our standard hour. $2 our standard rate. Our standard rate is rate per hour. However, the $4, which is the 2 times 2, is our rate per unit. So the rate per unit is standard hour, standard rate. If you go to variable overhead, same thing, standard rate, standard hour 2, and like you see, what I was saying yesterday, your rate will always be, your hours will always be based on the labor hours, because it's when labor is working that overheads are being incurred. So you generally see that the overhead rate or the overhead hours will be the same as the labor hours, because labor is what determines. However, the rates will be different, of course, because what you're paying labor is not necessarily what you're incurring on overheads, but the hours will be the same by standard. So your standard hour is 2. Your standard rate for variable overheads is 0.3. For fixed overhead is 3.7. Your standard hour standard rate, which is your standard rate per unit, for overheads is 0.6. For variable overhead is 0.6. For fixed overhead is 7.4. And then finally, they give you standard profit there and standard selling price. So your standard profit you calculated as 6, right? Because that is, if you will, that's the standard price minus the standard cost. Your total standard cost is 14. If you look at the end of that place, so your total standard cost 14. Your total standard price, standard selling price is 20. So the difference between that gives you your standard profit. Is this fine?
Yes.
Please answer.
Yes, it's fine.
Okay. And then finally, and remember what I said, standard on top, budgeted in the middle, actual under. Now, see, if you go to the other part of the question, Mr. Rashid, you can go on.
Okay. Budgeted plant output for the month of June was 5,100 units.
And that's your budget. Sorry for interrupting again.
Okay.
That's your budget. So your budget information will be given to you in the middle. Then after that, the rest of it will be actual. So you can move on.
The actual results for June 20X7 were as follows. Production of 4,850 units was sold for $95,600. Materials consumed in production amounted to 2,300 kg at a total cost of $9,800.
Okay, please pause. Before you move on, all I just want you to see is they've given you your actual production, 4,850.
Yeah.
They've given you the amount that you sold for, what you sold, how much you made from selling was 95,600. So your total revenue for the period, if you will, that's your actual sales quantity times your actual selling price. That's your total revenue. Remember, we said, that's why I emphasized that from the beginning. Your revenue is a combination of your price and the volume. So the total revenue is quantity times price, right? And we have said this over and over again from throughout decision making. And then look at this next part. They now give you your material consumed. Now, so for material, for labor, for variable production overhead, and for fixed production overhead, you will see information that you need. You've gotten your 2,300 as the materials consumed. So the materials that you used, the actual materials that you used were 2,300. And then the total cost of material was 9,800. Same thing with labor. Labor was paid 8,500, and that cost 16,800. However, labor operated for 8,000 hours. Now, the difference between what you paid labor and what they operated for will bring us when we were discussing yesterday and we are mentioning idle time. I said idle time is calculated separately. The difference between what you pay labor for and what they worked for is your idle time variance. So with this now, I didn't read the question earlier, but with this now, we would have to compute idle time. So idle time will make us adjust our labor pro forma slightly. And you will see that the actual amount of hours that labor works for will now be the basis for any overhead cost that you're incurring. So all overhead costs incurred will be based on the actual amount of time that labor worked for, not how much you paid them, not the time you paid them for, because there will be idle time inside that time, and that idle time is taken care of. So unfortunately, from the beginning of our pro forma, we will need to adjust our labor to show hours worked and hours paid. And if you remember from prior studies, idle time variance will always be adverse because you will always pay more than the worked. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, if we use that concept just as we start computing, it means that since our idle time variance will be negative, will be adverse, then it means that top will be smaller than bottom. So we'll put the one in our pro forma now, when we are making the adjustment, we'll put the lesser one, which is the hours worked on top and the hours paid under, because that will now make this minus this to be negative, to be adverse. Variable production overhead, they've given us the total amount in actual terms, and then fixed production overhead, they've given us the total amount in actual terms. So as we come back now, we set up our pro forma on Excel, and we our direct material cost. So we have our direct material. And so we have standard quantity, standard price.
In the exam, do we have to write it on full?
Yeah, if you write it like this, it's fine. So I'll leave space, actual quantity, standard price, and then actual quantity, actual price. So top minus bottom will give me a figure that I will make bold. And then I can do all the other ones the way I want them. So we start. What's our actual quantity? So my total answer, okay, so maybe I should just carry these things, copy them, or no, cut them actually. And let me paste them here instead. I don't need any space. Okay, so I'll get my answer, then I'll get my variance. Okay, so my actual quantity, actual price, that's where I'm starting. So I'm going to material, actual quantity, actual price is what?
9,800.
9,800, because the total amount spent on material for the period, the total cost of material is the actual quantity, actual price. Like we said, actual quantity, actual price is usually given in total form. So we usually expect that in total terms. So 9,800. Everybody with us? Okay, so we now go back. We usually start our pro forma from the bottom. That is the standard way I'm going to walk through all my pro formas. I start from the bottom. The bottom information is usually in total terms, so it's usually easier. So I like to do the easy things as soon as possible. So what's my actual quantity now?
0.5. Okay, actual quantity.
Actual quantity.
2,300.
The actual quantity is the actual amount of materials, the actual kilogram of materials in this case. It can be liters, it can be kilogram, it can be anything like that. So that's my actual quantity.
2,300.
So my actual quantity 2,000. What did you say? 2,300.
300.
Right. Absolutely fine. Now my standard price, I go to standard information.
$4.
What's my standard price? My standard price was for material, so that would be in kilogram, dollar per kilogram. So $4.
I have kilogram.
Right? You said what?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's fine. So if I have that as my, oh, I know why, I see why I left that space. Should have left that space. Okay, so let me do this.
Undo.
No, don't worry. Okay, so now I have my $4. Then my standard quantity. Standard quantity is what? I would like anybody that has not done variance with me, especially at F2. Those are the people I really want to talk. So, AY, Uju, Mr. Rashid.
Yeah.
That's where I want. So what's our standard quantity? Standard quantity is the quantity per unit, and standard information is usually given to you on top. You says what?
It's 0.5 kilo times.
Thank you very much. So 0.5.
Yeah.
And we said that standard quantity is short for standard quantity of actual production.
Yeah.
So what's our actual production now?
4,850.
4,850. Thank you very much. So 4,850. And then our standard price is still from what we did on top, right? What we did below it. Our standard price is still 4. Abi?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Standard price for material. Okay, with this now, I can come and calculate my middle one. So I can calculate my actual quantity standard price. So my actual quantity standard price will be equal to the actual quantity multiplied by the standard price. That gives me a figure. Is this fine? Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I can now come and do my standard quantity standard price on top. So I have that same figure. So it's equal to the standard quantity multiplied by actual production multiplied by my standard price. So that gives me my figure. And so I have my figures to calculate my variance. So first of all, what is my usage variance? Usage is on top. So what's the usage variance?
500.
So the usage variance will be equal to top minus bottom, right? So top minus bottom. So that's a 500, and I can write 500. Please don't forget to write your favorable because it is positive.
Yeah.
So leaving it as positive and negative is not answering the question for variance. You have to write whether it's favorable or adverse. So let me cut that. So I'll just give this space for them so that it doesn't, I will not squeeze everything. Let me put them separately. So therefore, I have my usage variance as this. Now, what's my price variance? So I want to do my price next. So my price variance again is top minus bottom, right?
Yes.
I'm seeing something else.
I didn't hear you.
I'm not seeing the screen again.
Okay, please, to come back. It's having issues. Okay, should be back anytime from now. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next thing is my price variance. So my price variance as always, will be my top minus bottom. So it will be equal to the top minus the one below it. So that gives me my figure. And that's negative. So that is adverse.
Adverse.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's that.
Then give us the total variance, material total variance.
So material total variance now will now be the top
100
minus the
adverse.
bottom. So the top of your pro forma minus the bottom of your pro forma, or you can do it as the usage minus price. However, I know that this causes confusion and people usually make mistakes with all of this. So it is 500 minus 600.
Minus 100. So all in all is adverse.
Yes.
So it's adverse. So therefore, total material variance we can now say is equal to the top now, the top of your pro forma. So standard quantity, standard price minus your actual quantity, actual price. So that is 100 adverse. So let me shift this thing down.
You're the one that made you red bar.
No, it's getting red by because it's negative and it's in dollars.
Okay.
And it's in dollars.
In exam, the dollar doesn't come out.
No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Okay, so we are done with our direct material. Is this fine for everybody?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so we go to direct to labor variance now. So labor, same thing. So I've cheated and carried the pro forma down. So all I want to do is to adjust for rates and price. So sorry, for hours and price. So hour and instead of that is rate, right? And we said something happened to labor. So is that adjustment I also want to make now? So hour rate and then we'll also incorporate something. So we'll just we'll add another pro forma in the middle, and that pro forma will be exactly the same thing as the second one. So we'll have actual hour standard rate again, and then we can come and put our actual hour actual rates below. Okay, so the difference between the second and the third will be that we would have actual hours worked. You said worked will be less, Abi? So worked will be on top. So since worked is less, worked should be on top.
There's only in cases where there will be idle time, bar.
Only where there's idle time that you will see this. So actual hours worked as compared to actual hours paid. Just because we want to identify idle time. So we start again. What's our actual hour actual rate from this question? What's our actual hour actual rate? Actual information with respect to labor.
Actual hour is 8,000.
16,800.
It's usually given to you in total terms. So the first thing you will do is to look for what is the total amount paid to labor for the period. That's your actual
16.
hour, actual rate. So that's what you're looking for. And this thing will just come with practice. That's why I said you can't be too smart and you can't be too dumb for variance. It's just practice. If you have something that is right that can help you to work well. So the total amount paid to labor, 16,800, right?
16,800, yeah.
Yes.
So 16,800. Since I've started in dollars, let me just continue in dollars. So that's that. Then my actual hours paid. How many hours did I pay for?
8,500.
8,000.
8,000.
I paid 8,500. I paid them for 8,500.
Yeah.
You paid for 8,500.
But they actually worked
8,000.
They actually worked for 8,000, Abi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can carry 8,000 to actual hours worked, and that's the 8,000 I'll be using going forward. Now the rest of it is standard rate. What's the standard rate per hour? You go back up to your standard information. How much did we pay labor per hour?
$2.
$2. Thank you, Cyril.
For 8 hours. For 8,000 hours.
Oh.
Okay.
Why is this thing happening to me now? And I went to copy the wrong thing. Okay, let me start again. Okay, so just Control X, shift it by 1. So I'm just shifting everything by 1 because I want that space for my actual production.
Jesus.
Okay, so that's my.
Okay.
So my standard rate we said was $2. So one thing you can do under exam condition is to just carry it up for all of them, because it will be the same for every one of them. As long as you don't make a mistake, then you should be good. So it's equal to, it's $2 every single time. That's fine. So I've done that. I'm almost done with my pro forma. All I need now is my standard hour. So what's my standard hour for labor?
2 hours.
8,000.
My standard hour for labor is usually per unit. This standard
2
information
hours.
is usually per unit. So 2
hours.
hours.
Okay, 2 hours for 8,000.
And then my actual production now, remember that's what I'm looking for. So for my actual production, what's my actual production?
8,000.
Actual production.
4,850.
I don't understand though.
It's the same production. The same question. 2,850.
I thought it's 8,000.
Actual units produced.
For the
Actual units
period.
produced, Ayo.
4,850 now.
I don't understand.
That's why I'm asking you, Ayo. What is the actual production? How many units did you actually produce?
4,850.
That's what I want. Ayo, do you understand now? It's 4,850. That's the actual number of units you produce. Whether it is labor. Now, Ayo, can you see my screen?
Mm.
So what I will do is I'll just go upstairs and pick that 4,850. It will always be the actual production, that 4,850. So I can go and pick it from there and put it here. I don't have any problem. It will always be that same. That actual production is constant. Whether it's material, labor, overhead, anything, your standard hour or standard quantity is multiplied by your actual production. We said that, like I said, as you do this practice, you will go back to the note and you will see that it will make more sense to you. Do you get that?
Yeah.
Okay. So quickly, we're seriously out of time. So let's go. So this is equal to this now, multiplied by that. We get that figure. Then the next one is equal to this figure multiplied by that. We get that one. And then finally, the last one, that's our, why am I putting it in the wrong place? Okay, so carry this one up. Control. I want it to be facing the written part. So up. Okay. And then finally, this one now will be equal to our 2 multiplied by our actual production multiplied by
Standard.
Okay.
So multiplied by our standard rate. So what does that give us now? So our, first of all, our efficiency variance, right?
Yes.
So efficiency. So our efficiency variance will be equal to, as always, top minus bottom. We have that figure. We know that that is favorable because it's positive. Then we go to the next one. After efficiency, this is for idle time now. So idle time is a special variance that only occurs, and we know that idle time must be adverse. If your idle time is not adverse, you've made a mistake. Idle time can never be favorable. So that's that. So that's adverse.
Which is that
So what we would have expected.
500 hours times the rate.
Yeah, basically, it's 500 minus the rate. But I like to just do everything the way I know it. Yes. So then our rate variance now, our rate variance will be equal to the top minus bottom. So the one on top of it minus the one below. So that's 3 minus 4 in our pro forma. And we have that. That's also favorable. Okay. Now, all we need to say is therefore. So we can say therefore.
Stay in stick.
Our total labor variance. Our total labor variance will be the first minus the last. So no matter what is there, it's just the top minus. So standard minus actual will give me my variance. And my variance is favorable because I have 2 favorables and 1 adverse.
You're not including idle time.
I've included it. But I've not. You don't need to do this. It's the same thing now. So if I look at it now, so I can say I'm adding all the variances together. That will give me the addition of all the variances will give me my total variance. So 3,4 minus 1,000 because 1,000 is negative. That is 2,4. 2,4
Okay.
plus 200 is 2,6.
Okay, because I
That's
didn't see you
2,6.
click it. That's all.
You said what?
No, it's because I didn't see you click it. Well, okay, I get it.
Okay.
I get it.
So we move on gingerly to our variable production overhead. Okay, so our variable production overhead would not have, it won't have idle time. Idle time is only calculated for labor, and it's only the hours worked that we are going to use. So variable production
And you still use
overhead.
budgeted hour.
No, we don't need that for variable. It's for fixed that we need budgeted. So I can come and control V. Okay, it didn't work. So I have my standard hour, standard rate. So under that, so actual hour, standard rate. And please remember, let me just put that here so that we remember. So that's hours worked, not paid. And then finally, I have my actual hour, actual rate, which will still be the hours worked. So what's my actual hour, actual rate from the question? I think by now we can pick small speed, and we have entered another person's time. So what's my actual hour, actual rate for for variable overhead?
Actual hours, $2.
Actual hour, actual rate is usually given to you in total
2,600.
terms.
2,600.
2,600.
Okay.
Like I said, all these things will come with practice.
First, they ask us now to what is the actual rate now? Is it 6? Actual rate now will be 2.1.
So we'll find what our actual rate is. Yes, the actual rate will now be that divided by the actual hours. Yes. So that will be 26 divided by 8,000. Okay. What's our actual hours worked?
8,000.
8,000.
What's our standard rate for overhead? Variable overhead. Standard rate.
Variable overhead.
0.3.
0.3.
0.3.
0.3.
Okay, so we can carry the 0.3 upstairs too. So it's equal to that 0.3. Then we have our standard hour now. What's our standard hour?
2 hours.
2 hours.
For labor,
2 hours.
so 2. So we expect it to be the same thing with our labor. So remember that once you have standard hour, it will be standard hour of actual production. So go and get your actual production. Ayo, what's your actual production?
4,850.
4,850. So I can go and pick it from the one on top. I don't have to rewrite it again. So we're done with this. This was pretty straightforward. So it's equal to, so our middle pro forma will be equal to this multiplied by that. We get that figure. And then our standard rate will be equal to this multiplied by this multiplied by this. That gives me my figure. I can leave you to do the rest of them. So my efficiency now. So my efficiency will be equal to top minus bottom.
510.
And then my expenditure. So my expenditure
-2.
will be equal to top minus bottom again.
-200.
So maybe later I'll come and do the fashion of this thing. I've run out of time. So this is favorable.
Fashion.
No, as in the old design things that I'm always doing.
Oh,
like
okay.
I told you, that thing is not going to earn you any mark. It's going to waste your time. And when you get to the end of the exam, you will regret it if you start doing all those bold and everything.
No, I don't even try it. So.
Okay, so that's that. It's all this dollar now that I'm leaving, but I'll come back and do them later because we have only 3 minutes and another class is starting. So we go to our fixed production overhead so that we can do our sales variances. So fixed overhead. So quickly, what's our fixed overhead variance? What's the bottom?
2,300.
4,300.
So we have standard hour standard rate. Then we have actual hour
standard rate.
Standard rate.
Standard hour, standard rate, actual hour.
Budgeted hour.
Then remember you have your budgeted now. So Cyril, that's what I was saying. Like we fix production that you now bother about budgeted hour standard rate. Doesn't affect the actual rate.
Actual.
So what's actual hour actual rate? What's the actual
42,300.
usually given to you in total terms? What's that?
42,300.
42,300. Then our budgeted hours is what from the question? So see your budgeted units here.
5,1.
See your budgeted. Can you see your budgeted unit?
Yes.
Divide by.
So your budgeted unit, I'll explain this in the future. So your budgeted unit is 5,100. That's what you need. So 5,100 multiplied by your standard rate.
Rate.
3.7.
3.7. Yeah.
So 3.7.
Mm.
So your actual hours is what?
8,000.
So 8,000. Now this was your budgeted, is your actual hour, your budgeted, I said standard, so you need your standard too. You need your standard. So let me pick that unit. So that unit, the way you have, and I'll explain this, like I said, going forward, the way you have your standard multiplied by actual will give you standard. Standard multiplied by actual units will give you your standard. That's the same way your budgeted will be budgeted multiplied by budget will give you your budgeted. So your budgeted hours, your standard hours multiplied by your budgeted units. You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
So your standard hour now, your standard hour is 2, Abi.
Yeah, 2 hours.
So 2 hours multiplied by your budgeted units. So your budgeted units will be in the middle for the budget, while your standard rate will. So we'll see this in practice as we go forward. So my budgeted rate, my standard rate is same for all of them. So the only thing that is remaining now is what's my standard hour? Standard hour, like we saw, was 2, right?
Yes.
That's now multiplied by actual production.
That's 4.
Sorry, please, how did we get this 3.7? I've been punching.
3.7 is in your standard. Go to your standard information.
Standard rate for fixed overhead.
Okay.
Your standard rate for fixed overhead.
Okay.
Okay, so that's with that now we can do our figures. So we have our budgeted hour standard rate. So that will be equal to this multiplied by this multiplied by that. That gives me my figure. Then my actual hour actual rate will be equal to this multiplied by that. And then finally,